Love will be covering just a brief background of the outreach with the neighborhood. I will then be going over the assessments and the construction award for the project, and then we'll send it back to you. And then we'll have myself, Steve, and then also Steve Coomer in the audience, who is the city staff person. He's the engineer of record. So we will have staff persons to address questions and also meet with people after the hearing. So with that, if we can get the PowerPoint presentation up, I will hand it over to Steve Love.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Tonight we'll be talking about the Western Hills Area Street Improvement Project, City Project 1014. Tonight's meeting covers the assessment hearing, the adoption of roll, and the award of bid. The Western Hills Area Street Improvement Project, as shown on the map, the streets incorporated in this project are highlighted in black, are generally bound by Roselawn Avenue to the north, DeSoto Street to the east, Larpenteur Avenue to the south, and Rice Street to the west. As Michael Thompson indicated, providing information to the residents is an important part of the street improvement project process. An informational packet was sent out to the area residents on September 2nd, 2010. Informational neighborhood meetings were held at the MCC on September 8th and 9th, October 20th, and December 2nd of 2010. Public hearing was held on January 10th of 2011. Support for the improvements were received at the public hearing. An open house plan review was held on March 23rd of 2011. Beyond just the standard street improvements associated with the Western Hills project, there are also neighborhood improvements planned. The ideas generated for these neighborhood improvements were started from the brainstorming sessions at the neighborhood meetings. These improvements include sidewalks along Larpenteur Avenue, Jackson Street, and Adolphus Street. These sidewalks will provide access to bus stops and businesses along I-35E and Rice Street. The sidewalks will provide residents with a network that connects the neighborhoods to the businesses and the city park on the east side, as well as the trail system and businesses along the west side. The other improvements that were requested include improved street lighting within the neighborhood. Additional street lights are planned at intersections and curves on the neighborhood streets. Improvements to the city park were requested. Upgrades to the parking lot have been planned. Residents requested turnarounds to be added at the ends of dead-end streets. Adding of turnarounds will help eliminate the use of private driveways as turnarounds. Also, information was gathered from the informational packets that were sent out regarding trouble with sanitary sewer services. Staff has helped coordinate the televising of these sewer services. If there is an issue with the sewer service within the street right-of-way, these sewer services will be repaired as part of the street reconstruction program. At this time, I'll turn the presentation back to Michael Thompson.
Thank you, Steve. Next, we'll jump into the assessments portion of the project. And to preface this discussion, it's been a flurry of activity today in the engineering department. It appears there was a flyer that was passed throughout the neighborhood. So we've been getting a number of objections based on that flyer. And there's a handful of false claims in that flyer, including the city is having trouble with its benefit analysis for special assessments. I will kind of go through the process on what we did for this project, and to make it clear, you know, the city did follow all statutes and the necessary legal processes. So unfortunately, it appears somebody flyered in the neighborhood yesterday, a day before the hearing, so there is some confusion among some of the residents, and I hope to allay some of that with my presentation. Assessments for improvements are based on our policy. The council had adopted an official policy in 2010, and it's also based on benefit appraisals. The idea is to treat properties consistently through assessments, and assessment rates are per the policy. Just a quick discussion on past project assessments. Over the past 2 to 3 years, assessments have ranged in the range from $7,000 to $8,000. However, with a benefit appraisal specifically conducted for this neighborhood, the amounts were lowered because the benefit was less, and I'll go through that process over the next couple slides. The assessments are mandated to be equal to or less than the benefit received by the property. So what is the market value increase of the property? That has to be conveyed to that parcel as part of the improvement. So our assessment policy, and I'll read it verbatim, it specifically states, prior to assessment roll adoption, the special assessment levy shall be verified to be at or below that of the benefit received by subject properties. And we did do that. Back in 2010, we solicited proposals from 3 different appraisal firms to conduct a special benefits appraisal to determine the benefit for the subject properties. And the firm selected was BRKW, and they did produce that report to our city attorney, I believe, in November of 2010. There are 291 properties proposed to be assessed under this project, of which 5 are commercial properties, and there are 286 residential. Assessment amounts reflect the appraisal report, and I'll go over those amounts. Compared to past years, yes, they are lower. They were lowered because of what that special benefit appraisal showed. So in Area 1, the assessment rate is $5,800 per unit or per household, essentially. Area 2, assessment rate, $5,000 per unit. There were 2 properties that had a similar assessment proposed. However, in City Project 87, in 1987, they were assessed under that project, I believe, a little over $1,000, and in today's value, that equates to a credit of just over $2,100. So their assessment was reduced by that $2,100. So 50 and 64 Roselawn, which do abut the project improvement, their driveways do, are proposed for a rate of $3,618. And the staff did contact both homeowners before the hearing to relay this more detailed information. Also, there is a townhome site off Larpenteur. There are 11 units, and the special benefit appraisal showed $3,100 per unit. And then the commercial properties, the Champs, the apartments, those were all individually appraised, and those amounts are all within the assessment roll attached to the agenda report. In sum, total proposed assessments are a little under $1.7 million. And just as a large-scale look, the entire project cost is estimated at about $6.9 million. What is the process for payment of assessments if this action goes through tonight? There is a 30-day period after the approval of the roll where a citizen can come to the Public Works Department and make a payment that is interest-free. This payment can be, the assessment can be paid in full, 100%, or if you choose, it can be partially paid with a minimum of 25%. A lot of times some homeowners decide they don't want to make any payment at all, and that's fine. What would happen is the entire assessment would go onto the taxes as a special assessment at 5% interest over 15 years. Kind of a middle of the road scenario. We do sometimes get people who want to come in, they'll pay 25% of the assessment within 30 days interest-free on that 25% amount, and then the remaining 75%, that would roll over to the taxes. So there's a variety of ways this could occur. And I should note all of this information is on the assessment statement, but certainly staff is available to answer any questions. As of last week, the staff had received 2 assessment objections from 217 Summer Avenue and 1808 City Heights Drive. Obviously, there have been many more that have been received. I'm going to go ahead and read those into the record. Karen, I don't know if you have the list of those. Quickly, what will happen is staff will recommend adopting the assessment roll except for those with objections. And a recommendation will be made at the May 23rd, 2011 meeting regarding those objections. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read these into the record, but the assessment hearing is the last opportunity to make an objection to preserve your rights if you want to move forward with an appeal through district court. So if I don't read your name tonight, you should, if you want to object, is to come up to the podium, and I believe the mayor will be going over that process in a little more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading through the names, or the addresses. 1724 Able Street, 1706 Agate Street, 1793 Agate Street, 1832 Agate Street, 1705 Arkwright Street, 1866 Beaumont, 1873 Beaumont, 1733 City Heights Drive, 1766 City Heights Drive, 1808 City Heights Drive, 130 East Summer Avenue, 154 East Summer Avenue, 217 East Summer Avenue, 1700 Edgemont Street, 1723 Edgemont Street, 1765 Gurney Street, 63 Kingston Avenue East, 395 Kingston Avenue East, 1757 Onacrest Curve, 1783 Onacrest Curve, 15 Roselawn Avenue, 1766 Sylvan Street, 1772 Sylvan Street, and then I'm going to read through the objections that the city clerk has received this evening. 1845 Beaumont, 1860 Beaumont, 1774 City Heights Drive, 395 Kingston, 1740 Onacrest, 1719 Able Street, 104 Bellwood Avenue, 385 Kingston Avenue, 1826 Agate Street, 50 Roselawn Avenue, 1714 Edgemont Street, 1706 Edgemont, and it appears some of these are repeats that have objected twice, but I'm still reading everything into the record. Next is 1695 Edgemont Street, 1803 City Heights Drive, 1912 Adolphus Street, there's a Beaumont Street. It looks like, I can't read the name. You want to look at that? I'll just, 1853 City Heights Drive, 1838 Agate Street, 1793 Onacrest Curve, 156 Bellwood Avenue. It appears 373 Kingston Avenue, John Shama, 77 East Kingston Avenue, 1867 Beaumont, 1755 Agate, 171 Summer, 191 Larpenteur Avenue East, number D, 1777 City Heights, 5 Kingston Avenue. It appears 63-95-97 Fenton Street, 1861 Beaumont, 1712 Able Street, 1714 Edgemont, 223 East Belmont Avenue, 1902 Adolphus Street, 1888 Beaumont, 1895 Beaumont, 1744 Onacrest Curve, 1754 Onacrest Curve, 1770 Onacrest Curve, 1702 Able Street, 1706 Able, 1758 Sylvan Street, 1754 Sylvan Street, 1799 Agate Street, 76 Kingston Avenue, 77 Kingston Avenue, 1800 Agate Street, 1730 Sylvan Street, 1730 Sylvan Street, 142 Bellwood Avenue, 1774 City Heights Drive. I'm going to go ahead and continue with my presentation, but if there's any... 1888 Beaumont Street was the address that we further looked up with the name. I'm going to continue on with the presentation, but I should note if there's any people in attendance now, there are additional assessment objection forms in the back. Please fill those out now and be prepared to hand those to Ms. Guilfoyle during the public hearing portion of the hearing. I quickly wanted to cover also the City Council has adopted a process for senior citizen disability, National Guard, and/or military reserve deferrals, and this is authorized through Minnesota statutes. And what this is if there's a hardship and you meet one of these criteria, that the assessment can be deferred for a period of 15 years with interest. But after that 15-year period, that assessment would come due. And I'll read some of the criteria. A person who is 65 years of age or older, a person who is retired by virtue of a permanent and total disability, a member of the National Guard or other military reserves called into active service, and lastly, a person that is unable to meet payment obligations due to proven financial hardship. And also there is an additional one, and that is the undeveloped property deferral. And typically this is deferred without interest. And if a vacant lot is then developed, then that assessment would come due at that time. To quickly go over the bid, the city did receive 3 bids for the proposed construction project. T.A. Shifsky & Sons, Hard Drives, and Palda & Sons. The engineer's estimate for the base bid and all of the bid alternates was $5.6 million, and Shifsky came in at a little over $5.4 million, including all of the alternates. The city does have a good work history and references with Shifsky. They did successfully complete our 2010 Hills and Dales area street improvements. As I mentioned before, the award is in the amount of $5,406,359.31. The staff is recommending award of the base bid, and we also are recommending award of all of the bid alternates. I'm going to quickly go through those. Bid alternate 1 was for adding the sidewalk along Larpenteur, and that is maintaining our consistency with a comprehensive plan for trails and walks. Also the sidewalk along Jackson Street. Bid alternate 3 is drainage and stormwater treatment on the St. Paul Regional Water Services site. And this is contingent upon an agreement between the city and St. Paul Water expected for the next regular meeting. Fourthly is bid alternate 4 for pervious pavements located at the Western Hills Park parking lot, the end of Adolphus Street, and also the end of Summer Avenue. This also includes a pervious sidewalk along Adolphus Street, and a lot of these items are in keeping with the watershed district requirements and our NPDS MS4 requirements for treating stormwater and reducing the runoff from the neighborhood. Next is recommend the award of bid alternate 5, and that's the Skillman Avenue storm sewer reroute. As you know, Sandy Lake was recently filled by St. Paul Regional Water Services, so we are working with them to reroute the storm sewer. Bid alternate 6 is for sanitary sewer mainlining We find very good cost in doing our lining now with our neighborhood improvement projects. 7th is Beaumont Street Sanitary Sewer Main Extension. This is for actually sewer and water that would accommodate people on a well and septic system and also an undeveloped lot. And lastly, bid alternate 8, we're recommending the seal coat of Jackson Street. So again, the engineer's estimate was roughly 3%. The Shifsky's bid was 3% less than the engineer's estimate. And the last slide here is the project financing. The City Council, as part of the feasibility study, approved the budget of a little over $7.1 million, and that accounts for the construction portion and all of the indirect costs. So that's total project cost. With the Shifsky bid of a little over $5.4 million and 28% of indirect costs, we are expecting to come in roughly $250,000 under the approved budget. So with that, I will turn it back to the mayor for any questions.
Are there any questions that the council members have? Mr. Nephew.
This is sort of a process question. I got an email from a resident today who had seen this flyer that was circulating in the neighborhood, and she was concerned that the project might be in peril. And I thought that was not likely at this point, given where we're at. The improvement was ordered at an earlier meeting. We haven't actually awarded the bid, but I'm wondering if, hypothetically, is it actually possible to cancel the project at this point if people who would be benefiting from it simply aren't willing to pay for, well, it's like, what, a sixth, less than a sixth of the total cost of it?
Mayor and council, certainly at this point there's been a lot of investment that's already been put into the project. Certainly this is a council decision tonight. It requires a 3-2 vote or a majority vote. And certainly projects have been canceled in the past, but I don't believe they've ever been canceled at this point in the process. We've done a lot of investment. Plans are completed. Certainly, from speaking with residents and our staff, I believe the neighborhood supports the improvements. It's going to be a great investment to the neighborhood. However, there is a side of that where the city policy is that there is a share that is supported by residents directly, and that is $5,000 for most residents. Some others have $5,800, but compared to past assessments, this is rather low. And that is over 15 years. To put that into perspective, that's with interest, that equates to about, if you make no upfront payment, about $43 a month. So certainly it does require the residents to invest in their neighborhood, and that's consistent with treating everybody in the city fairly. We do have a program throughout the city that we get to every neighborhood once, and we're still going through neighborhoods, and there are many bad neighborhoods in the city that we need to get to. And certainly, I would not like to see a project canceled, but again, that is a council decision, and staff recommends moving forward with the project.
Well, certainly, given that it's the city at large paying the bulk of the project, it's a little bit tough to go when there's people not willing to do their part as other neighborhoods have. But I think perhaps it's most disappointing that there's some underemployed hack lawyer out there looking to use this as a way to drum up business maybe during a slow economy, with the potential of derailing such an important process of some streets that really need some work.
Are there any other councils or comments? Councils, are there any other comments or questions by the council? Ms. Juneman.
Actually, it is kind of a comment. Michael, maybe you could go over again the fact that there are 3 different assessment rates so that people understand why there are, so that if they're going to say anything particularly to us, they might hear somebody say $5,800 and somebody else say $3,600 and wonder what the world's going on. So I just think maybe we should get this into our heads just before we start having public comment.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If I can go to the overhead, please. I'll switch to the slide that talks about the assessment rates. what our assessment policy says is that the appraised value, the benefit, has to be shown for the properties. Currently, our rates are above what is shown here. I believe they're in the $7,900 range, but in following with the policy, we had special benefit appraisals conducted, which showed that these properties would not benefit by that amount. Thus, they were lowered even before we completed the feasibility study in 2010, even before the public hearing. So what the difference here is when that appraiser looks at the properties, he looks to see what is the change in market value after the project improvements are complete based on the property. So he selected various properties throughout the neighborhood to support his professional appraisal opinion. And certainly, we used an expert on this. We stayed consistent. We are extremely confident that we followed all policies, procedures, and we can support this amount for this neighborhood. So in Area 1, there is an increased assessment because there are additional improvements being done compared to Area 2. And certainly there's an entire report that's privileged with the city attorney that goes through that. But then 50 and 64 Roselawn, this is a way of staff making sure that, okay, they invested in this area back as part of the 1987 project. Why should they be paying more than the neighbor next door? So it's an equity thing. We wanted to give them a credit of a little under $2,200 to show that past investment, even though they are getting a full street repair where their driveway is abutting the project. And then the commercial properties all were individually appraised, and so that's the quick process.
What's the difference between Area 1 and Area 2? There's an $800 difference, and what was the difference in improvement?
Yep, Mayor and council, some of it had to do with some of the existing storm sewers, some of the different things, but I can't speak, I'm not an appraiser, so I can't go into all the details, but in the professional report, all that is listed in there.
Thank you.
Are there further comments or questions by the council? Okay. Mr. Cantrud.
Mayor and Council, I hope this is helpful more to the audience than to you for your decision, but one of the important things that I think you also need to realize is that when we're talking about market value as it relates to the benefit to your property, that market value increase is a measure of the improvement to your land. So you have to look at this as, well, is my house worth any more just because of this improvement? No, in and of itself, there is no improvement being made to your house. That's a popular misconception with street improvements. It's what happens if your house burned down. Do you think you could make more money on that lot with those improvements than if your house burned down with the streets as is? And the answer in most people's mind is yes, but that's what that benefit analysis has done that we do before these projects get going. So just thought I'd help with that clarification.
All right, thank you. So, as I mentioned before and was mentioned by Mr. Thompson, we're about to open the public hearing. Actually, at this point on the initial sign-up sheet, there's only 5 people who signed up. Seems like a lot of people to be sitting in the audience with nothing to say, but maybe there's another sheet back there. Once we open the public hearing, and if we have 5 people come up and speak and they say that and nobody else comes up, I'll close the public hearing, and at that point you will have given up your right to file an objection. And so we've said that several times so far throughout the meeting. I want to make sure you understand that if you allow the public hearing to happen and I close it, then that's the end. You can't file an objection after that point. So if you think you're going to file an objection, you should be doing so. Is there anybody in the audience who didn't, who's filed an objection who did not hear Mr. Thompson read it off? All right. And do you have an objection in your hand there? You should turn it in to Ms. Gill. Well, maybe now we should give it to Mr. Thompson. Why don't you go to this side of the room and give it directly to him?
Mayor and council, I'll read these additional 3 objections into the record. 1741 Agate Street, 1705 Able Street, and 1805 Agate Street.
Okay. All right, so now, is there, Ms. Guilfoyle, is there another sign-up sheet that, you gave me just the one? Okay.
There is none back to sign up.
Okay, that's because it's right here. All right, so we're going to open the public hearing, and I'll just read off the names. Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor and Council, we just received one more. 1786 City Heights Drive.
Okay. So we'll open the public hearing. And so I'll do a combination of things so that I don't butcher up a bunch of names, but the first one was Kristen, who lives on Kingston Avenue.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Kristen Borowski. I live at 63 Kingston Avenue East. I did have a letter put in record. I sent that off this morning, but I did have it done before that little flyer went around town yesterday. I just want to let you know that. I am opposed to the project in general, but I understand the streets are in disrepair. I live on the
Could we stop for just a second?
Yes.
If anybody has a cell phone, turn it off. There's a sign on the door. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. I live on the west side of Jackson on Kingston Avenue, and I've been there for about 15 years. My understanding that road was repaired in the early 90s, a little bit before I was there, and that street is really in good condition, I think. I've driven around the rest of the project area, and yes, those streets are in disrepair, and I understand the project that has to be done. But when we're talking about just my street, I feel that the assessment is a little excessive for what needs to be done directly on Kingston Avenue East. I think it's just a matter of removing and installing new streets and then putting curbs in, is what I'm hearing. I think the sewer's in all good shape and all that other fun stuff. The other portion that I really found a hard time with is these rain gardens that we talk about. And I've seen them installed in the Kenwood area. I'm not real impressed with them. We all got a flyer on one day saying they're free. You know, somebody's walking around, they're going to install these great rain gardens for you, and the next day we get the tax assessment bill. So timing wasn't the greatest. I don't feel that I should have to pay for a rain garden if I don't want it in, and I don't. I have 11 other gardens that I have to take care of, and I just don't feel that I should have to pay for somebody else's rain garden if they want it installed. You talk about the increase in the property value, I believe you mentioned, and again, the $5,000 to my property, I don't think I'm going to see a $5,000 increase in the market value to my property. The last thing I just want to mention is I think a lot of people in our neighborhood, I'm speaking for a lot of people right now, sorry, but don't know if we can really come up with the 5,000 or the 5,800 or the 25% or whatnot. There's foreclosures. There's a lot of houses for sale in that area, and we're being penalized for having to possibly finance. You mentioned $43 a month. I understand that. I ran the amortization schedules. At the end of the 15 years, it would be a $7,000 project to me, not $5,000. And the 5% interest rate is a little high. Prime interest rate is only around 3%. You can go buy a car at 0%, and so I think the interest rate is a little high on the assessment as well. So in the end, I just strongly believe that the $5,000 assessment put on my property is excessive and doesn't benefit my property in that same amount. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. There are a couple of comments I'd like to make. You can sit down. And just so people maybe understand rainwater gardens a little bit, we as a city are required to infiltrate the first 1 inch of waterfall or rainfall whenever we do a street project. And so our choices are a couple. If we can figure out ways to take that and put it into your front yard in a rainwater garden and let it infiltrate, it costs almost nothing. If we have to put in sewer systems and stormwater systems, and then holding ponds and weirs and all the other types of things that we'd have to put in order to take that same water and treat it and then eventually put it into our wetlands and our lakes and that type of thing, it costs lots of money. And so by not putting in rainwater gardens, you are making the project cost more, because it costs a lot more to treat the water in other ways, and we are required to do so. And so, even if we just dug holes in the ground and didn't put any plants in them, it's a money-saving feature. We try to make them look as good as we can, and of course that works better if the person who has the rainwater garden participates and, actually keeps it up also. So that's just a little something so you understand those a little bit better. And then I just refinanced my house, 10-year loan. I got 3.85%. 15-year loans were up in the 4.75, and so I think 5% is a pretty doggone good rate. And so I just did that, just closed 2 weeks ago. Mr. Nephew.
Mr. Mayor, you covered most of what I was going to say, but I was going to add that the city's policy on the interest rate is that it is a margin of 2% above whatever we are getting when we sell the bonds. We're actually borrowing the money to cover your assessment if you decide to use that option. And I believe later in the meeting we'll be getting the detailed report on the bond sale, which I think happened today. And so I believe that we actually are getting a 3% rate as a city, and that's why the rate is 5%. I would certainly encourage anyone who can go to another place and have zero closing costs and get a lower rate than that to go right ahead and do that and take advantage of the prepayment. But for being something effortless with regardless of your credit history or collateral or anything, it's just simply 5% if you want to pay it over 15 years. I think that's a fairly good deal. Certainly one I'd be inclined to take.
Thank you. Next we have Christine, who lives on Sullivan. Good evening.
I'm Chris Lato. I live on 1772 Sylvan Street, also known as the access road to the St. Paul water plant.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'm the very last house, so the water plant is my neighbor. And about 7-8 years ago, they redid our street with new sewers. They did curbs on their side, and they asked if they could do curbs up to my right side of my driveway. And they gave me a new driveway apron. And I'm in the high bracket of the assessments, which I don't understand, seeing all my stuff is new. They did put in the rain gardens, and they seem to be working well. Again, I don't think I need one, because there's one right across the street, and the holding pond's also across my street. And the water plant is also responsible for plowing our street. Also, I moved in the house in '93. They have my property description wrong. And I've gone between Ramsey County, the city, the post office, and I can't get it straightened out. They have me have an alley access way, and I don't. So I need to make sure my house isn't going to be blocked off during the project also.
Whoa. Mr. Thompson, do you have any comment about the improvements that she's talking about and how that affects anything?
Mayor and Council, Steve Coomer is the project engineer that worked on the design. And regarding Sylvan Street, I think he can speak to some of the improvements that are proposed. But certainly, the objections tonight, we certainly will look at those and report back to you at the next meeting. So if there are legitimate concerns, certainly, it is our attempt to work with the residents and make a recommendation to you that's fair and equitable. But regarding the specific project improvements, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and Mr. Thompson. The northerly portion of Sylvan Avenue was actually redone by St. Paul Water, and their resident is correct. But that portion of the pavement, the improvement basically ends at their driveway, and the rest of the way south is unimproved.
Okay, so is it just her house that's affected?
I believe so. I'll have to take a closer look at the plans.
And where does Sullivan Street end in relationship to her house?
Mayor and council, it's the last house on the east side, and then it connects into the St. Paul Water parking lot. So it all connects through, but the entire driveway that she uses for access is unimproved. So that all is being improved as part of the project. So essentially, it's a long driveway that's being improved that goes directly to her home, but can also be used by St. Paul Water.
And does St. Paul Water, are they actually responsible for plowing that, or do they just plow it because essentially it's the access for all their employees?
Mayor and council, I do believe we have an agreement, so they do maintain that. I don't have the agreement with me, but it stipulates what they must do. It also stipulates the requirements for when improvements are done and if they pay assessments. So there is an agreement on record.
All right. Well, it certainly sounds like a situation that warrants some additional looking at.
Mayor, council, I agree. That's something staff will work on over the next week and work with the resident and come back to you on the 23rd with a recommendation.
Okay. Did you file an objection?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. Who- If you're going to speak, you got to come to the microphone.
Do you know?
No, you're not at the microphone yet. Okay.
Do you know who I go to change my description of my property? Because I've been trying this, well, at least twice a year for a few years.
Apparently, Mr. Kanchud wants to deal with your property description.
Okay.
And so, can you get her a card or something? Okay?
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. No guarantees he can fix it, but he's the best one that we have, so. All right, I'm going to screw this one up. I can't read it quite well, but is it Blong, who lives on Edgemont? Good evening.
Good evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, so I am Blong. On behalf to live on 1706 Edgemont Street. Also represented my sister, who is sitting here, a single mother. She's living at 1714 Edgemont Street also. The reason I'm here is because that at the moment, I can see that, and everyone knows that the economy is going down. So she's a single mother, and I also have, just a triple bypass, and then do not have enough income to to take care of my house. However, the economy going down, and I see that a lot of residential area that they just almost not afford their houses at this point. So I can see that city. I am very appreciate the city of Maplewood try to be improved the area what we live. So I am appreciating that too. However, the 5,800 to me that I will not be able to afford at this point. If you put into my property tax and charge 5% interest, so my house would be way up into $2,000, over $2,000 per month, then I will not be able to. Also, that my neighbor who is living two houses right below and my house, they just sell their house, just cost $150,000 house, $150,000. So, and I can see that the house value marketing right now is too low. So I can see that 5,800 does not make any profit at all to my house, at this point. So I have no money to pay at this point. If the city of St. Paul make a monthly payment like $150 per month for quite a few years, 6 years, 10 years, or whatever from now, or extend more time instead of November, so we can find a way in order to help the city of St. Paul. Because to improve is not just only for city of St. Paul, to improve is for us also. I agree. I will not say anything about that. But at this point, the economy is going down. The property tax has been increased for a couple years already. So right now, it's continuing to increase, the property tax. So far, 2011, I see the cost, however. So I am totally disagree, and I'm here to present the two-family that I'd like to cancel the project at this point. Thank you so much.
And before you step away from the podium, are you aware, and did you hear that there is a financial hardship deferral that you can apply for?
Because I am the sickness person, I have a, triple bypass,
No,
we and I do not know what kind of source that we can come out for $5,800 for.
You have the ability, through a deferral program that the city offers, to say, I don't have the money to pay for it, and as long as you can show documentation that indicates that your finances are not in good shape, then you do not have to pay for 15 years. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay? Mm-hmm. And so, if the project moves forward, and you're in the financial, and your sister or sister-in-law is in those...
She's a single mother with
yes, right,
7 children.
The point is, if you can document that indeed you don't have the money to pay, then that you will not have to pay for up to 15 years. So you should see Mr. Thompson about getting the proper forms for that. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have Bill from Gurney Street.
Good evening. My name is Bill Taylor, and I own the property at 1765 Gurney Street. And according to the letter I got here, that you are going to redo the streets, sewers, and everything else from Larpenter Street down to Kingston. Well, actually, my property is north of Kingston, about 100 yards, and according to this here, they're not going to be doing no sewer, no streets, no nothing in that area, but yet I'm still being charged $5,800 for basically something I don't understand. And then the second thing, I don't know how this, what happens? Does somebody get a hold of me if I filed one of these papers? Does somebody going to call me and I have a meeting or court, or how does that work?
The staff would make their assessments of each objection, and then at our next meeting, which is what date?
23rd.
On the 23rd, they would bring back their recommendations to the City Council of how to handle each objection, and then the City Council would make a determination if they agree with that or want to modify it, and we would vote to either approve what the staff has recommended or not, basically. And so they don't call and sit down individually with each person at that point. They just go through and look at it, try to determine in their mind whether you have valid objections.
And then is there a notice sent to you, or, I mean, would I get a notice saying that what your decision was?
We send it individually, Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, what we'll do over the next week is we'll actually look at all the details, objections, what they're objecting based on, and we'll mail you a letter stating what our recommendation is going to be to the City Council. And if you disagree with that, we encourage you to show up on May 23rd. So certainly we do send you a letter directly that's addressing your specific issue.
Okay. Do you know anything about?
And so now you say that you live on Gurney.
North of Kingston.
North of Kingston.
Yeah, I got a map.
Okay, according to my map, there is no Gurney north of Kingston, but...
Here's actually, there's my house right there. There's Kingston.
So, Mr. Thompson, is our map just in error? I presume we're improving all of Gurney all the way up to apparently what becomes a private drive?
Every other one there says dead end, so.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor and Council, I can address that specifically. I have the plans here. Yeah, that is right now on an unimproved driveway, essentially. So we are going in there and reconstructing that entire access as part of the project improvements. And that was conveyed at the open house meeting also.
I didn't hear that last part that you said. So now it...
Yeah, his whole driveway is being improved. That whole area north of Kingston is being improved on Gurney.
Right, but it's not his driveway, it's the street, but it just services his house,
Correct.
okay? So we're actually going to make a street out of what is supposed to be a street, not your driveway.
Well, it is a street, but I mean, right. But, actually, there is no sewer system there. I mean, a sewer, I have 120 feet from my house to the sewer because there's no sewer system that goes back that far, where every other house is only like 30 feet or 40 feet at the most. So, I mean, for me, I'm going to have to put a whole new sewer line in for 120 feet because the sewer doesn't go back all the way to my house. The sewer, in other words, I have to pay more because I have a longer way to go to find a city sewer system. You know what I'm saying?
Mr. Thompson, when we go in to actually take what is currently his access to his house and make a street, are we putting in city sewer in that section of street and city water?
Mayor and council, if it's not there, it's the practice that we always extend that as part of the project.
And so, at least judging by the hand-drawn map that he had and whatnot, it looks like the street goes in a certain distance and then it really becomes his driveway, private land. And so we would set it up so that we have city utilities all the way to the property line. And so if there's 120 feet to the city right-of-way, there's still going to be 120 feet. That would be off of how you built your house. But if you're including all the way down to Kingston, well, that's going to become city sewer, and so your sewer would get much shorter.
Mayor and council, according to plans, there's already sewer and water directly under that section of Gurney north of Kingston. So services should already be adjacent to the property.
Yeah, it ends actually in the neighbor's, well, it ends about, from my house, it ends 120 feet south, basically, is where the sewer is. That's where mine ties in, because I have to have it cleaned out all the time so I know how far it is. They have to have 120 feet of holes to get to the sewer.
Well, if that's the case, then it would be because of how your house was located, not anything that the city did.
Well, if the sewer was all the way through to the end of the street, then it wouldn't be that far. It would be a lot closer.
Well, like I say, it sounds to me like that's what we're doing. If we're going to actually
Are they going
improve...
further? I mean, are they going further than they are right now?
Mayor and council, I'd be happy to address all these specific questions, and these are the types of things why we have so many open house meetings to try to address these up front. But certainly it appears all the utilities are right there, and we have 3 staff persons that are going to be available after the meeting to address all these questions. I'm sure there's a few more like it, possibly.
Okay. So, we'll get it worked out, but it does sound like there's improvements that would be happening in your situation. And the last one, oh, Mr. Nephew.
Just one last comment. Will mentioned how the recommendation of the staff will come back to us on the 23rd, and we might, for example, agree with staff to deny an objection. Then you would have the option of bringing your case to district court, hiring an attorney, and attempting to get your assessment lowered through the legal process by appealing the city's decision, which you'd have to talk to an attorney about what your prospects would be for that.
Imagine there might be some flyers in your neighborhood advertising an attorney, be followed up by the ones that they put out to get you all agitated. All right, so the last person signed up is Lori, who lives on, is it Beaumont or Belmont? Beaumont. Beaumont, okay, somewhere in between.
Hi, I'm Lori Sherman, live at 1867 Beaumont, and my questions were much more general in nature. Until the flyer arrived, I actually understood from the literature and the open houses that I attended that the calculation for the assessment was done as a percentage of the overall project cost. So the benefits assessment appraisal process was not made clear, at least to me. I didn't come away from any of those meetings or read any of that literature and come away with that information. So a number of my questions were already answered in your presentation this evening. A further question I'd have on that process would be, is that information, that appraisal benefit information, available then to residents?
Mayor and Council, I'll answer that by saying it's of a limited use right now, so it is restricted for our purposes to justify what's happening here. Certainly it becomes discoverable if anyone challenges this in a court process and it has to be introduced. Another analysis would be done verifying and confirming what that analysis was before the project, and that's what the city would use. And obviously, then that would be available to you.
Okay. You answered another one of the questions about the interest rate. How was that calculated? And then a further question would be, what are any risks or liabilities to the property owners during the work? Say, for instance, if there's an accidental bit of damage to homeowners, sanitary sewer, those kinds of things.
Mr. Thompson?
Mayor and council, with all of the projects, the contractor team